Hello and welcome to WorkVantage. I am Sandhya Lakshmanan, your host for today's session. The environment where we work deeply affects how we feel, think, and perform, reminding us that where we work is just as important as the work itself. From lighting and air quality to operational practices and workplace policies, every aspect of our surrounding shapes our well-being in ways that often go unnoticed. Joining me today to explore how we can advance health and well-being in the workplace are two leading voices from the International Well-Building Institute. Jack Noonan, the Senior Vice President for APAC, leads wealth strategy and operation across the region, and joining him is Tanvi Kesarwani, Technical Accounts Manager for Asia Pacific, who works closely with organizations to bring the well standards to life through practical implementation. Together, we'll take a closer look at the well-building standards and evidence-based framework, helping organizations create more thoughtful and intentional spaces that prioritize human health and well-being. We'll explore the core concepts of the well-building standard and the growing focus on holistic sustainability, alongside practical guidance on how to implement these strategies and ensure that they deliver long-lasting impact. Whether you're beginning your wellness journey or aiming to strengthen your organization's commitments, this conversation offers key insights to help you build healthier and more resilient workplaces. Hello, Jack and Tanvi. Thank you both for joining us today. It's great to have you both as part of this session. Let's start with a simple one. If you both had to explain the WELL standards in just one sentence to someone who's never heard of it, how would you do it?
That's a great question. It's something that I often have to explain to my own family, actually. The way that I would describe the WELL standard is essentially using science and evidence to improve the experience of people, with a particular emphasis on how we can use buildings and the built environment, as well as organizations, to drive better health outcomes within the community.
That's brilliant. What about you, Tanvi?
I think WELL standard is a roadmap that brings health, happiness, and heart into places where we live, work, and thrive.
That's a great way to sum it up. Before we dive in, we'd love to hear a bit about your personal journeys. How did each of you find your way to IWBI, and what inspires your passion for advancing health and well-being?
Another great question. So firstly, the way that I would describe myself is that I am the son of a nurse. So my mum was a shift nurse for a number of years, and I'm also the husband of a school teacher. And so my wife is a secondary school teacher. And the reason why I mention that is that both my mother and my wife have very much influenced my my values as well as my passion for health and well-being within the built environment. I'm a little bit different because unlike a lot of my colleagues and people that I've worked with over the years, I'm not an engineer and I'm not an architect. I'm actually a scientist by training. So I studied to be a geneticist at university. And I quickly realized during my studies that I couldn't spend the rest of my life looking down a microscope. It wasn't something that really drove a passion in me, and I was too focused on interacting with people and really wanted to kind of build better relationships through my career. So I decided to, after doing my science degree with a focus in genetics, I decided to do a Master of Business with a particular emphasis on the commercialization of science and new technologies. Now, when I finished that particular degree, that's how I kind of fell into the world of building science, architectural science, and also environmental science. I started working predominantly on rating tools, green building rating tools, and I fell in love with the industry. I fell in love with the property industry, and for me, it was something that was very tangible. So I worked for a number of years in architectural, building, and environmental science, and really developed a very, very strong passion for that. And so my previous role was actually managing climate change programs for the Victorian State Government here in Australia. I should have mentioned that I am based in Melbourne. I am born and bred in Melbourne, and I'm very, very passionate about Melbourne as a city. So I was working on climate change programs for the Victorian State Government, but that kind of passion that I had for buildings never went away. And when you're working on managing climate change programs, it is a broad suite of programs, not just in property, but across the entire community. And I really missed working on buildings. So the International Well Building Institute at the time, this was in 2018, was still relatively young. It was growing. It was still very much a startup. And I got offered the amazing opportunity to basically build the International Well Building Institute in Australia and New Zealand. So in 2018, I left a very comfortable and rewarding job working for state government to really take a chance on this thing called WELL and this momentum around healthy buildings. It is something that I've been with the organisation for 7 years now. I started working only in Australia and New Zealand, but now my role involves managing the operations across all of Asia Pacific. And when we refer to Asia Pacific, we include India within Asia Pacific. And when I started with IWBI, my role was very technical, and that's one thing that I love. I love using the science from my degree. I love using the science from my career to inform decisions and to really drive momentum around the healthy buildings movement. But as my role has kind of expanded over the years, it's more advocacy, it's more market development, it's bringing WELL into new communities, into new markets. So that's my journey. It's something that I'm very, very proud of. And I often tell people that I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to travel the world and look at the best buildings and share insights from different countries and different cities. And I'm very, very lucky to do what I do at the International Well Building Institute.
Thank you, Jack. That was an insightful look into how your personal experiences have shaped your professional path. Tanvi, what sparked your interest in this field and led you to where you are today?
Unlike Jack, I can't say my journey has been quite as versatile or cinematic. No dramatic career pivots. I come from a fairly grounded architectural background. I've always been drawn to the idea of designing spaces that do more than just function, spaces that feel good, support well-being, and make a real difference in people's life. Over the years, I had the opportunity to work on a range of corporate interior projects where I gradually shifted my lens from aesthetics and functionality to something more deeper, the human experience. That's where my curiosity for WELL really began. I saw it as a mindset, a movement. So I started exploring WELL in my earlier role, advocating for its adoption and even successfully guiding several teams through their journey for WELL certification. So joining IWBI as a technical account manager felt like a very natural step in this journey. So here I get to work with clients across APAC, helping them understand, apply, and bring to life the principles of WELL building standard. It's a role that combines my technical understanding with my passion for creating more people-centric environments. And also what drives me the most in this journey is the impact. It could be either a healthier workspace, a more inclusive environment, or even a small change that, makes someone's day better. So also over time, I've realized that every conversation, summit, and collaboration has deepened my belief that buildings can care, and that design, when done thoughtfully, can be a very powerful tool for well-being.
That's great, Tanvi. It's clear that for both of you, there's a deep belief that buildings aren't just structures, they're opportunities to positively impact lives. Building on that, let's zoom out a little bit and talk about the triple bottom line. Social, environmental, and economic sustainability define a holistic approach to long-term success. Traditionally, the emphasis was mostly on environmental responsibility, but over time, health and well-being have become an equally vital part of the dialogue. What do you think drove this shift, and how has it changed the way we approach sustainability in the built environment?
Another really great question. The chair of the International Well Building Institute, Rick Fedrizzi, who's often recognised as the godfather of the green building movement. He was the founding CEO and chair of the US Green Building Council and one of the founders of the LEED rating tool. He's also one of the reasons why I started working for the International Well Building Institute, to be perfectly honest. He often defines this kind of momentum that we're going through as the second wave of sustainability. So the first wave was really focused on resource efficiency, environmental sustainability, and really limiting the bad that we were doing in the world. With this kind of new wave of sustainability, it's much more focused on regenerative design. So that is a term that many of your listeners or your viewers will have heard of. This is this idea of using our built environment, using our environment to actually create better outcomes. So rather than just focusing on limiting harm, how can we actually do more good? Now, this is something that's really important to the health and well-being movement, because what we're seeing is the emergence of social sustainability as a term. So you mentioned that there was a very strong focus on environmental sustainability. Now, when we talk about sustainability, people use the term ESG really interchangeably. And for those who aren't aware, ESG refers to environmental, social, and governance. And this is kind of the new way of defining social sustainability. The important part of that is that social sustainability is really about the impacts on people and how we can drive better health outcomes and better impacts on people. And that's just not individuals that are working for an organization. It's also looking at supply chains. It's looking at wider communities as well. So this is this kind of changing narrative that we've seen across the industry. Now, one of the things that I often say, I mean, it's not a coincidence that I'm based in Australia, because Australian buildings in particular have really led the world as it relates to environmental sustainability for a long time. We're often coined as having the first Green Olympics, which was the Sydney Olympics in 2000. And a lot of people might not know this, but the Green Building Council of Australia was formed as a result of the Sydney Olympics. So we've had this really strong focus on environmental sustainability for a long time. But when organizations become so energy efficient, when they're addressing environmental sustainability in such a strong way, they inevitably say, what's next? What are we not doing well? And I think it's a real credit to the Australian property industry that they recognised that health and well-being and social sustainability was something that they needed to be doing better. And that's one of the reasons why outside of the US, this healthy buildings movement really started to evolve. Now, since then, we've started to see the same momentum in markets like India, in markets like Singapore, in markets like Japan, where organizations, they know what good looks like in relation to environmental sustainability, but for a long time, they didn't know what good social sustainability looks like. With the introduction of the Well Building Standard, it's a really good way for organizations to demonstrate what good social sustainability looks like. And this is the key reason for this momentum that we've seen across industry.
That's an insightful perspective, Jack, especially the idea of moving from doing less harm to doing more good. Tanvi, building on that, what are some of the key drivers you're seeing behind this shift towards healthier and more people-centric spaces?
Okay, so now we are clearly witnessing a shift towards more healthier and well spaces driven by multiple factors. So awareness in the market has grown significantly. Over time, we've also realized just how deeply buildings impact the people who use them. Talking about air quality, access to natural light, to temperature, noise levels in our surrounding, everything influences our health in a very powerful manner. One of the global tech company redesigned its headquarters using well strategies, trying to improve more of indoor air quality, introducing more of biophilic design and flexible workspaces. So post-occupancy surveys of that particular headquarter showed increased employee satisfaction, reduced sick days and better focus. So awareness is coming out. And at IWBI, we know that the long-term value creation makes a significant impact on business performances. Various studies and researchers have also shown that prioritizing well-being positively impacts productivity, satisfaction, and long-term business outcomes. In fact, recent study found that the well certification improved overall occupant satisfaction by nearly 30%, as well as well-being scores by 26%. Reported mental health scores by 10% and productivity gains by 10 median points. And when you invest in people, it pays off in the bottom line. As someone who's been in the industry for quite some time and who's also seen the shift towards well-being in the built environment, I really appreciate how we at IWBI make it easier for organizations to take meaningful actions.
That's such a great example, Tanvi. And those numbers really speak for themselves. It's clear that when spaces are designed with people in mind, the returns show up across the board. Speaking of solutions, there's a growing emphasis on human health and experiences, especially in workplaces. And IWBI plays a key role in this space. Can you walk us through IWBI's offerings and how organizations can tap into these resources effectively?
Sure thing. And one thing that I really should say to kind of frame some of this conversation is that, to date, the WELL program, WELL Standard, is being adopted across roughly 77,000 projects in 137 different countries. Now, to put some of those statistics into context, when I started with the organization back in 2018, we had roughly 1,000 projects in 26 countries. So we've gone from 1,000 projects in 26 countries in 2018 to 77,000 projects in 137 countries in 2025. Now, the key reason for that is the WELL Standard and the flexibility around the WELL Standard. When WELL was first introduced into the marketplace in 2014, the main criticism of the standard was that it was very US-centric. And when we launched Well version 2 in 2018 or 2019. The idea was that it was a truly international standard. So the Well standard is something that grounds all of our different kind of products and all of our different offerings. Everything is based on this evidence-based, science-focused standard called Well. Now, within the standard itself, there are around about 120 different features. For those of you who are familiar with LEED or Green Star or Green Mark, you would refer to these as credits, but they are represented across a number of different categories, or what we call in IWBI language concepts. Now, organizations choose what they want to do from the standard, and they can either target full WELL certification. So many of your listeners who are familiar with WELL would know about WELL certification. We often refer to it as the pinnacle of a healthy building. And the reason why I think WELL certification is so popular and the reason why it's so important is because it's a very rigorous process. For WELL certification, you need to address all 10 different concepts of the WELL building standard. So you can't have a healthy building that just focuses on air quality but does nothing for the mental health of occupants. You can't have a healthy building that just focuses on acoustics but has really, really poor materials that is making everybody sick. The idea of a healthy building and the idea of WELL certification is that all of these 10 different categories of health and well-being are covered through. Now, organizations then choose different levels of ambition and different particular features depending on their project, and they can either get bronze, silver, gold, or platinum certification. Now, for many organizations that are more interested in a particular topic rather than this kind of pinnacle of health and well-being, they can target one of the ratings offered by IWBI. So we have 4 different ratings, and they are the WELL Health Safety Rating, the WELL Performance Rating, the WELL Equity Rating, and the WELL Co-working Rating. And these ratings are a little bit different because rather than being organized across all 10 different concepts, they're organized around a theme. And a lot of organizations that don't necessarily know where to start, or they might think of the process of WELL certification being very rigorous and very potentially quite difficult, organizations will often start with a rating first around one particular topic. So particularly in India, what we've seen is many organizations pursuing the WELL Health Safety Rating. And the WELL Health Safety Rating is a subset of the broader WELL standard that is focused on the resilience of buildings. How resilient are buildings to organizations and workplaces and schools and hospitals to shocks within the environment? So the WELL Health Safety Rating was developed during the COVID-19 pandemic and has been our most successful rating to date. Another rating that I think is really worthwhile mentioning is a rating that's very close to my heart, which is the WELL Equity Rating. And the WELL Equity Rating is a subset of features within the WELL standard that focuses on diversity, equity and inclusion within the built environment and within organizations so that we can drive better inclusive outcomes within our workplaces and within our buildings. Organizations that want to kind of take this as a journey, they want to look at WELL certification on a number of their offices, they want to look at ratings on a number of their portfolio, they can engage in a program called WELL at Scale. And WELL at Scale is an approach where organizations engage in an annual subscription to IDO, and they can target as many ratings or certifications as they want. This is something that has been incredibly popular in India. Many of the major property companies in India, like Tata Realty, like Embassy REIT, like Nucleus Office Parks, like many others that my colleague Tanvi works on as well, all of these organizations are engaging in the WELL at Scale program. And with the WELL at Scale program, every intervention that they make contributes to their performance as an organization, and they can get recognized through the International WELL Building Institute. So IWBI has a lot of different programs. We have a lot of different offerings. The idea is that organizations can choose an approach that is tailored to them. And we are obviously very mindful that when it comes to health and well-being, it is an iterative process. And we want to meet organizations where they're at. And therefore, we have a wide range of different programs and a lot of flexibility with the programs that we offer.
Thanks, Jack. That really brings out the versatility and flexibility of IWBI's programs. It's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all and that organizations can engage at a level that aligns with their goals and capacities. With the WELL standard being such a comprehensive framework, it's interesting to consider where the most untapped potential lies. In your experience, which concept is often overlooked but has the potential to make the most significant impact?
That's a really, really tough question. I'm going to cheat, if that's okay, and actually give you two different concepts. One that's very, very close to my heart, and another that I will freely admit I'm not an expert in, but I think it's a huge area of untapped potential. So the first that is very close to my heart is the air concept. At IWBI, across all of our projects globally, we do a lot of surveying of our projects. We ask them what's important to them as organizations. We ask them what are their drivers, what are their motivations, and all that kind of sort of thing. One of the really interesting things that we hear from our organizations is that air quality, indoor air quality, is a very high priority from organizations globally that are engaging with the WELL standard. But if you look at the data as it relates to our WELL at Scale program and the number of points that our organizations are achieving in the air concept, it's actually quite low relative to the importance from our clients. So I see that as a huge potential opportunity. Organizations are saying that it's a very, very high priority, but if you kind of rank all of the 10 different concepts, it probably sits at around 6th or 7th in terms of performance. Now, one of the reasons why I also want to call out the air concept within the WELL standard is because we are based in Asia Pacific, and some of the greatest impacts on indoor air quality, or just on air quality generally, are felt in Asia Pacific. And what people often don't make the connection with is that there's a huge connection between outdoor air pollution and indoor air pollution. And our buildings can actually be, and our workplaces can be, a line of defense against indoor air pollution and the serious health effects of air pollution. So I see that as a huge opportunity. I would love, often when I go through a number of cities in Northern Asia in particular, when you walk into a building, you walk into an office lobby, there will be a TV screen that has all of the air quality data for that particular building on the TV screen. And we don't actually see that a lot in many other cities. We certainly don't see that a lot in Australia. We don't see that in Singapore. We don't see that often in India. And I would really love that to change, because one of the most important aspects of addressing indoor air quality through the WELL standard, or just more broadly, is that you need to measure indoor air quality as a number one. And the WELL building standard prioritizes this by asking every single project that is targeting WELL certification to measure indoor air quality, because you can't manage what you don't measure. And air quality is a really important part of that. The second thing is being transparent with your air quality data. So well and good to capture air quality data, but if that's just kind of sitting on a bookshelf that the facility manager has not addressed, that's actually not helping anyone. So one of the really key aspects of the AIR concept is being transparent with that data, providing that data to your occupants, to your facility management team, to your different stakeholders that are impacted by that indoor air quality. So that I think is another really key opportunity that we see in the marketplace. Now, the second concept that I wanted to reference is the sound concept. Now, the sound concept within the WELL building standard, I think, has a reputation of being very difficult. When I talk to different people that are using WELL, they always say to me, "God, Jack, the sound concept is so hard. Why is it so hard? Does it have to be so hard?" It's really interesting because I actually see it as addressing a key topic that we've forgotten about. And what I mean by that is that we've had this really strong focus on green buildings for a long time. You know, for over 25 years, in many cases, many markets have been using green buildings to address environmental sustainability and aspects of health and well-being as well. But if you actually look at the research and you look at the performance of some of those buildings, the key area of dissatisfaction within many of those buildings is actually in relation to acoustic comfort. So people are very satisfied with those buildings in many aspects, but as it relates to sound and acoustic comfort, this is an area which has very high levels of dissatisfaction. With the WELL building standard, when we really kind of focused on WELL V2, we dedicated an entire concept to sound. And we really wanted to challenge the marketplace to say, here are a number of different interventions that we think can really push the needle in terms of acoustic comfort. Now, unfortunately, in 2025, I think the sound concept within the WELL building standard is probably one of the less pursued. So for a number of the optional features within the WELL standard, because there is this perception that it's quite a challenging concept within the WELL building standard, it isn't as pursued as other concepts. Now, I see that as a missed opportunity, because if organizations and if individuals within those organizations continue to say that acoustic comfort is really important to them, it is incumbent on all organizations, on all buildings, to actually start addressing that. And organizations can no longer say that they don't have the tools or they don't have the interventions that will address acoustic comfort, because it is publicly available in the Well Building Standard. So one thing that I often say is that even if you're not pursuing well, even if you're not pursuing well certification, please just take a look at the interventions within the Well Standard. And I would encourage any organization that has acoustic comfort and sound as a key priority, have a look at those interventions, free to access, and try to incorporate some of those interventions within your next project, because it can have a really significant impact on the experience of occupants within those spaces.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate how you highlighted both the air and sound concepts, especially the importance of measuring and sharing air quality data and the focus on acoustic comfort. Tanvi, from your experience, are there any particular well concepts you feel have untapped potential here in the Indian market?
Great question, Sandhya. So, in my experience, especially working in the Indian market, I have found that nourishment tends to be one of the most overlooked concepts, but also one of the most impactful. Part of the reason I think is the Indian cuisine. It is so distinctive. Our staple foods are deeply cultural. We grow up by eating parathas, biryanis, etc. And then the way we prepare and eat the meals is really different from the global norms. So when the team start working on well projects, they often meet the basic preconditions about the vegetables and fruits, but then hesitate to go further. There's this concern that, exploring nourishment means giving up tradition or trying to fit an idea of healthy into a different food culture. But honestly, there's so much potential here. If we just shift the approach, it's not just about cutting out the foods we love. It's about adapting them in a small and thoughtful ways. For example, instead of removing our regular food from the menus, teams can switch to more healthier options like brown rice, millets, and whole grains, use less of oil or ghee, and then include more lentils and legumes to boost protein consumption. So you can see small changes and big impact. What I love about the nourishment concept is that it's not just about the access to healthy food. It's about making the healthy choice the easy and the preferred choice. And sometimes the most effective strategies are the subtle ones. Design interventions that nudge people towards better habits without them even realizing it. So one of the examples that comes to my mind is a project with a rooftop garden. It's not just a green space. Employees actually grow herbs, edible plants, even raw honey in that space. But it's also designed as a mindful eating area, a space where people can step away from their desk at lunch, eat slowly, chat with a colleague. It sounds small, but it has a ripple effect for mental well-being, for social connection, and of course, for nutrition as a whole. So there's a lot we can do with nourishment, especially when we meet people where they are and build on the foods and traditions they already value.
Thanks, Tanvi. That's a thoughtful perspective on nourishment, especially how small, culturally sensitive changes can create a big impact on well-being. The WELL standard is designed as a global framework to enhance health and well-being. However, its implementations can face challenges in regions with distinct cultural, social, and geographical contexts. How can organizations adapt the WELL standards to make sure they work well in these diverse settings?
Really great question. So the Well Building Standard is an international standard. And when I say that, a lot of kind of project teams are a little bit confused by that. They say, well, if I've got a warehouse in Rome, do I use the same standard compared to a office building in Bangalore, compared to a hospital in Sydney? And the answer is yes. You use the same standard, and the same standard applies to all buildings, no matter the location and no matter the type of building or the typology of the building. The key is the Well Building Standard is inherently flexible. So while we have 24 preconditions that apply across the entire standard, that apply to every single building, every single context, the optimization, so the optional features that projects will pursue, will vary based on the project. So it's inevitable that a project in Bangalore will choose different features compared to a project in Singapore, compared to a project in London. And the idea is that when we created the Well Building Standard, particularly when we created Well V2, we created a big standard. So there are over 115 different features within the WELL Building Standard. Of those 115 features, they equate to over 200 points. Now, to get to WELL Platinum certification, highest level of certification that is available from the International WELL Building Institute, organizations need to achieve 80 points. So to put that in context, over 200 points are available across the standard. You choose 80. That doesn't mean that it's easy. In fact, getting to WELL Platinum certification is still very, very challenging. But what it means is that you're choosing the points that is most relevant to your particular project, to your particular location, and to your particular type of building. And in that way, we've been able to make sure that the WELL Building Standard is truly international.
So to give you an example, leading real estate investment trust in India, Embassy REIT, operates a portfolio that covers more than 33 million square feet across 98. So when they found WELL, they were seeking a program that could help them increase tenant satisfaction and also address growing demand for healthier office spaces that their clients were facing at a large scale. So they were also looking for a way to help clearly communicate their efforts to investors and shareholders and enhance their ESG reports broadly. So to answer these big needs, Embassy selected WELL because of the broad impact it could have on people and because of its data-driven approach. Since their office locations were concentrated at about 10 major campuses around India, they focused on maximizing points in the movement concept to demonstrate their focus on walkability, bikeability within these campuses. They were in the 58th percentile globally at the time of their WELL score, an impressive achievement for their first review. Another example that I can think of is the Good Nature Hotel that pursued WELL certification. They were very interested in enhancing circadian lighting, which is the idea that our eyes are not just meant for seeing, they also gather environmental cues that impact our hormone production. So disruption of circadian rhythms through inadequate access to daylight can actually associate with diabetes, obesity, depression, and also metabolic disorders. So Good Nature City focused on maximizing daylight in their spaces throughout the hotel through a central skylit lobby, which rooms overlooked into, in addition to the exterior facing windows. Additionally, the light system in the rooms is specially designed to mimic the color, temperature, and intensity of the sun to help the visitor or guest. So all in all, you can see that WELL is a living dynamic standard, constantly evolving to meet the needs of people everywhere. Ultimately, it's not about rigidly applying a global framework or a rule book. It's about creating healthier spaces in the way that's more inclusive, practical, and impactful wherever you are.
It's clear that customization is key. But what about timing? Is it more practical to integrate these strategies during the design phase, or can existing workplaces also make meaningful improvements?
Great question. I guess the easy answer is to say that incorporating all of these different interventions as early as possible obviously delivers the best outcomes. I mean, that's the easy response to the question. But the reality is that many of these organizations, many of these buildings have already been constructed, they've already been designed. Don't they deserve to be healthy spaces and healthy buildings as well? And the reality is they can be. A lot of these interventions within the WELL Building Standard focus on performance, they focus on operations, they focus on policies. That, I think, is one of the unique things about the WELL Building Standard. Yes, it incorporates design, but it also incorporates performance, operations, and policies to drive better health outcomes as well. It's not saying that any one of them is more important than the other. It's just saying that all of them are important and all of them need to be weighted equally as it relates to really defining a healthy building. People design a space to be used and for that design intent to be met. But somewhere along the line, people forget about that. So it's really important that we consider the operations and the performance of these particular spaces. The reality is that existing buildings can adopt a number of these principles. And in fact, we have a number of organizations in India, a number of big iconic property companies like Prestige Group that are looking at getting very high levels of WELL certification across their existing buildings. Now, one of the reasons why they're doing this is because they're trying to attract the best tenants. Those tenants are trying to attract the best people, and the existing infrastructure does not need to be an inhibitor of driving good performance. That being said, if you can incorporate a lot of these design principles right at the start, you are going to get the best outcomes, because if we can design spaces that have better materials. As an example, that is going to have an impact not just on the materials themselves, but also on the air quality within the spaces. We mentioned the sound concept a little bit earlier. If we can design some of those tricky acoustic challenges, if we can incorporate that within the design, it's far easier to incorporate some of those aspects in the design rather than retrofitting our buildings to drive better acoustic comfort down the line. That's not to say it's not possible, but obviously if you've got a blank canvas and you can use design to help with that, that's obviously going to be the best time to do it. The other really important aspect of this, I think, is that I mentioned policies before and this kind of idea of modeling from leadership. One of the key aspects of WELL certification is using our buildings essentially and our workplaces as ways to educate the occupants, creating these like behavioral nudges. So this is this idea that, we don't want to say to individuals, no, you can't do this, or you can't do that, or you can't eat this, or you can't eat that. What we want to do instead is we want to make the healthy choice the easiest choice. So if we can make the healthiest choice the easiest choice, we're actually creating behavior change. The really important aspect of this behavior change is that it's not just impacting the person's experience within that particular space or within that particular organization. That person is then leaving the office or leaving their school or leaving their kind of work environment, and they're going home and they're adopting some of those healthy practices within their home life as well. That's a key aspect of behavior change. How we can actually drive little nudges or create little nudges within one environment to drive better health outcomes within other environments as well.
It's absolutely possible for existing workspaces to make meaningful improvements. In fact, many well-certified spaces are existing buildings, proving that you don't need to start from scratch to create a healthier environment. So design phase integration allows for wellness principles like access to daylight and thoughtful layout planning to be embedded from the ground up. But in existing buildings, impactful changes can still be made through operational upgrades and policy shifts. For example, improving ventilation or introducing healthier food options, enhancing lighting, or creating zones for mental restorations can all be implemented in occupied spaces. The key is to access what's already in place, identify the gaps, and prioritize low barrier strategies that align with the organizational goals. Whether during design or as a retrofit, the WELL standard offers flexible pathways to make health a core part of the workspace experience.
Starting strong is important, but so is lasting impact. With that in mind, after achieving certification, what essential steps are needed to sustain its long-term impacts and ensure lasting benefits?
This is a really important question that you ask, because unlike many other rating tools, the WELL Building Standard or WELL certification is not a set and forget. So certification, if you achieve certification, it lasts for 3 years. And if you achieve a rating, it is an annual rating. It lasts for 1 year. And organizations are expected in that period to do what they said that they were going to do. So as an example, in the WELL Building Standard for WELL certification, you're expected to survey your occupants at least on an annual basis. You're expected to measure the quality of your air, the lighting, the acoustics, the thermal comfort, the water within your space on at least an annual basis. So WELL is not a set and forget. You are obligated, you commit to doing these things on an annual basis. And this is really important because when it comes to health and well-being, when it comes to healthy buildings, the kind of analogy that I often give is that you don't go to the gym once and suddenly you're super healthy. You don't brush your teeth once and suddenly you've got great dental hygiene, right? Health and well-being is a practice. You need to continue to do it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, to ensure that you're actually embracing a culture of health. So this is really something that is fundamental to the WELL Building Standard. You are required to do these things on an annual basis or required to do these things on a more frequent basis if you so desire. Now, if you don't do those things, the process of recertification after 3 years is more challenging. So if you're doing everything right, if you're doing your annual checks completely right, and you come to 3 years and you want to get recertified, the process is very, very simple. It is not as intense as the first certification. In fact, it's more of a kind of a check that you're doing everything right and you continue on with your certification. In many cases, organizations will even upgrade their certification. So if they got gold initially, they might want to choose to go to platinum for after recertification. But if you're not doing that on an annual basis, the process of recertification is more like the initial certification. And we make no apologies for that. We actually think that's a really good thing. It's really important that we're holding organizations and buildings to account. And this is one of the reasons why I think the WELL Building Standard and IWBI has been so successful. Because when people think about WELL certification, when they think about a WELL rating, when they think about engagement with IWBI, they think about a rigorous process that means something. It's not a tick the box exercise. It's not a tick and flick type of approach. It is something that is based on rigor and based on process, and something that needs to be maintained over time as well.
Absolutely. Achieving certification is a major step, but the real value comes from keeping the progress alive and building on it. As a final thought, what takeaways would you recommend for companies just getting started on their workplace wellness journeys?
So my key recommendation would be to jump on our website and have a look at the resources that we've got available. As I mentioned, the WELL Building Standard, it's public access. It's free for anybody to have a look at. You don't need to be pursuing WELL certification or a rating to actually access the WELL Building Standard. And you can actually have a look at a number of the different, you can have a look at all of the different interventions that form part of the WELL Building Standard within that particular website. So you can go to wellcertified.com and go to explore the standard and see all of those interventions whenever you want. The second aspect of it, and I think this is kind of a broader statement, I've touched on this a couple of times with some of my other answers, is that you really can't manage what you don't measure. And as a starting point, I would really implore organizations to really start measuring some of these key things. Once again, irrespective of whether you're pursuing WELL certification or a rating, do you have an idea around what the quality of your air is? Do you have an idea around the quality of the water, the quality of the lighting, the quality of the acoustics? And the second part of that is, do you know what your people think? Are you actually asking your people what they think of the space? Now, from our friends at Zyeta, who I know do some incredible work, when you're doing a new architectural project, you'll obviously ask the occupants what they think to drive the outcomes from the project further on when the project is being delivered. But if you're not going through a new design, if you're not looking for a new workplace, are you actually asking your occupants what they think of their space? As facility managers, are we adjusting the built environment? Are we adjusting the workplace to address some of those insights? So I would really encourage organizations to, if they're just getting started with this and they don't really know where to start, I'd really encourage them to just start measuring. Measure the quality of the air, measure the quality of the water, and actually ask their occupants what they think of the space. It's a really powerful tool for empowering your occupants, but also empowering your facilities team to understand where the opportunities really lie.
So adding to what Jack just mentioned, if you are just beginning your workspace wellness journey, the key is to start small and intentional. Focus on identifying easy and the low-hanging fruits, simple design interventions, minor operational tweaks, or even small policy changes that can be implemented without much resistance. When starting with WELL, especially for teams new to workspaces or well-being, the key is to take a holistic approach. You can't focus on just one concept like air or light and expect to create a truly healthier space. All the WELL concepts are interconnected, and it's this wholesome, balanced approach that brings the real impact in the space. So the first step is to identify the most approachable and practical strategy across all 10 concepts. Instead of diving deep into one area, look at the preconditions, the core requirements of each concept, and begin working on those. This will help the teams gain a broader understanding of what it takes to support the healthier and what it takes to support a health in a more comprehensive way. And then it can allow them to make more visible or meaningful changes right from the start. So once those changes are in place, it is important to let your employees know what's been done. Why this matters is because it directly impacts their daily experiences. Over time, as your team starts to feel the benefits, wellness will naturally become more central to every decision you make, shifting from one-time initiative to a continuous commitment that supports both people and their performances.
That's a great note to end on. Start small, stay intentional, and keep people at the center of it all. Tanvi and Jack, thank you both for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been a truly enlightening conversation on how strategy, design, and purpose come together to to shape healthier and more people-centric spaces. To our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope today's episode sparks some ideas and inspiration for bringing well-being into your own workspaces.